Welcome back to part 2 of my interview with Daryl Perry.
And I've tried different formats. One of them is called the Resilient AF podcast. And the reason that we go with that is because, everybody has a story and everybody has, they're still trying to figure stuff out, but they've been hanging in. And when you hear somebody talk about the things that they're really passionate about and the things that they've been through, and that started as like a 15-minute time frame. So it was literally people would come on, they dive into their story, and then they were talking about all their hopes. And like by the end of 15, 20 minutes, I'm exhausted. I know the listener's exhausted. And most of the time, and the other reason I started at 15 minutes was like, because people are terrified to do a podcast for the first time. Like, it's a brand new experience to them. But like at the end of 15 minutes, like they're amped up and ready to go because they just shared like some of the hardest stuff that they've been through and the goals that they have, and they're like ready to set the world on fire. And we're just like, everybody's like, man, like you can't help but root for somebody after you hear something like that. So
I think it's great that you invite people of all walks of life on. And speaking of doing hard things, didn't you have a weight loss journey of your own?
I did. This is probably another thing that sets me apart from most of your fitness people. I was not a competitive athlete, like at all. Right. The first time I was aware of my weight was when I was right around the time I turned 15. The first time I was trying to lose weight was probably about 17 or 18. And the thing for guys, you'll see body image is an issue no matter how you identify yourself, what gender you are. The industries market against our insecurities the same way. And it's kind of this on and off thing. So I was pretty much a dieter from the time I was 16, 17 up until when I was 30, 31, something like that. So like, I know what most people are going through, and most people don't have that history of being an athlete and kind of having the body's under there somewhere. Like they start doing the workout and the muscle memory starts to come back after a few weeks. And like, okay, I remember what this feels like. They just have to really pace themselves. I'm basically just like anybody else that wasn't an athlete that really, likes food and struggled with their weight for years. And I think the biggest thing is regardless of kind of like where you are, I'm all for personal development, both inside and out. And that's kind of my whole thing with health and fitness is this is just one really specific area where you can focus on, developing routines, focusing on actions, developing patience, things that really translate into so many different areas of life. But like, regardless of if you ever do another workout or if you follow any kind of eating plan, like it doesn't matter if you do that stuff ever again. Like as an individual and as a person, like you should have the most confident, like you should be confident in yourself. You should find the things about yourself that you really, really like and really just like go into those. And I've said a couple times recently, like you should be your own definition of sexy. Like you should be the sexiest person on the planet because like you're the one setting the standard. And see, the thing is whether we're talking about the weight loss industry or whatever else we're talking about, like so much of life comes down to confidence. And when you're somebody that has CP and people like, I say a lot of times, like 90% of people are cool. Like they're just doing their own thing. They have no, like, they could care less what me or anybody else is doing. But like you get that 1 out of 10 person that will look at you, that might gasp, that might gawk, and it gets to you. But like when you can get to the point where you're an adult and somebody still, because I mean, you know this too, like it doesn't go away when you're an adult. People still are ridiculous.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. But like when they can make a comment and you just look at them straight in the face and like they can see in your eyes that you're like genuinely confident. Like one, I mean, it's kind of cool that they can't phase you. But two, like you being the individual in the moment, you're like, I know who I am and I'm a fan. So, but so much of everything comes down to confidence, no matter what your situation is in life. Like,
but how did you get there, Daryl? How did you get from point A as somebody growing up with cerebral palsy and then dealing with the challenges that came with that for you?
So how I got there from a mindset perspective is I honestly just got to the point where what's the other side going to look like? I mean, I had every single insecurity, even into my 30s, if I'm honest about it. And, like I was a perfectionist. I had to have everything done a certain way. If the day didn't start off a certain way, oh my gosh, the entire day's off. And like, I think at some point I honestly was just like, this is clearly not working for me. What would literally, like, sometimes they'll just tell you whatever's going. I think it's an old Seinfeld episode where, like, whatever it is George was doing, he just did the opposite one day and he was like super successful. And that was kind of like what my thought was, like, what if I try to do things differently? And it wasn't an overnight thing. It really
never is, right?
No. And I'll tell you what, like, I do know when I was in my 20s, I went to a consultation with a therapist. At the end of that meeting, I was like, you know what? I don't need this. I can figure things out on my own. I wish that I would have spent some time, whether it was a year, 6 months, a year, whatever, in therapy, because I think the stuff that I started to really figure out when I was 32, 33 years old, I think probably would have set probably 5 or 6 years sooner. I mean, life works out the way it works out. You figure out things the way you figure out. You meet people when you meet them. But I just, that was one thing. And I do think in the world that we live in right now, we're talking about how immediate things are. I don't think from a brain capacity, a neurological perspective, I don't think if you were born in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and you grew up with life being a certain way, I don't think you were really ready for like where we are now and how fast paced things are. And I think, whatever resources people need as far as like counseling and therapy and mental health resources, like I think it's huge, because the world we live in now is so fast paced.
Yes, I was just talking about that with Kathy O'Connell, who was my guest, and she was talking about, she's a mental health counselor herself, but when she was doing a lot of work on herself because she wanted to meet somebody, and that really helped her. And we were talking about how there's no shame. I talk to a therapist every couple of weeks, and I've been for the past 11, 12 years, whatever. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you. And what I want to know is, what's your favorite junk food?
My favorite junk food, there's so many. It's Girl Scout cookie season. I'm going to say the chocolate-covered peanut butter Girl Scout cookies. I think they're the type.
Do you like to cook?
I do, but I kind of go in waves with that. Like, sometimes I'm all about just throwing a bunch of stuff in a crock pot and seeing what happens. Other times I like to actually follow recipes and try to make some new things. But yeah, I do. I enjoy cooking. And
I want everybody to know that you are married.
I am.
And you have a family. But the interesting dynamic is that your wife also has cerebral palsy, correct?
Yes. Pink unicorns. Yeah, we both have CP, and we are very quick to point out that is not why we're together, but it was absolutely, I think when we first met, it was definitely something where we were like, oh, you have this too. Okay. But yeah, she has CP, and it is nice being with somebody that has been in a similar situation, because like there's just nuances of having this that like you don't really want to explain to people,
or you might not even know how, and some
totally,
you know what I mean, some of it,
yeah. So yeah, she we've been together for 15 years. We've been married for 12. Wow. And yeah, she keeps me in line and deals with, because what you're hearing now with the animation and the energy, that this is pretty much what I'm like most of the time anyway. So.
And you have a son, is that correct? And a dog.
Yes. Yep. We have a teenage son, and he is just as thrilled as any teenager would be to be spending time with his parents during quarantine. and our pup is, how old is she now?
She's cute.
Oh my gosh. Well, she's very sweet. She's hyper, but part of that is of course her being a puppy. But yeah, she's about 15 months now. But yeah, she's sweet.
And so what would you say in terms of giving some tips for people to take away, people have any type of disability in their area of adaptive fitness?
So you actually know more about fitness than you think. If you've ever spent time in physical therapy, the way to look at exercise is that you're doing these basic movements without weight, without speed, like without trying to go fast or anything. You're trying to get the basic movements down first. So if you think of what physical therapy was like for you, it's probably a lot of stretching, probably a lot of mobility work, probably a lot of just trying to do what you could and improve movement patterns, a little bit. So you actually have a really solid foundation, so much so that I think most people, if they had a disability and they're not exercising, but they've been through physical therapy, they could dust off those old physical therapy programs that they had, and that PT would actually get them would be a good starting point. But then from there, they'd be able to build upon it. So I think when it comes to program design, I think people that have disabilities know more than they think. Also, another huge part of being able to exercise is being able to adapt. And there's nothing more when it comes to physical activity. We know how to do it. So, and I think the other thing would be just remember, and this is for anybody with fitness, but especially folks with CP, is like, you're not competing with anybody. You're really not even competing with yourself.
That's right.
Yeah, you're really just at first you're just trying to do this stuff consistently. You're trying to first get the solid quality of life on your day to day. Then you're trying to get a little bit stronger. Then you're trying to maybe build a little bit of endurance, and then maybe you're trying to do some performance stuff. But I mean, you can get so far from an independence perspective, whatever that looks like for you, just by taking it slow and really building something that you enjoy.
You bring up a great point, because there's so many people, no matter if they have a disability or not, that they just, I'm going to use the word quit again. They'll say, oh, well, I weigh 200 pounds. I don't want to walk in the studio because everyone's going to look at me. Or I can't do the moves that they're doing, and they get discouraged. And for me, what the trainer that I work out with, they have a streaming service. It's Get Healthy UTV. One of her sayings is, there's no shame in the modify game. So they'll show you. I mean, I usually watch workouts before I do them, because I want to know, do I need a chair? Where am I going to have to? Because I don't want to have to press pause, and I just want to know, okay, now Daryl's going to tell me to do this, and I need something to help me, or I'm going to not do what he's doing because I can't do it, and I'm going to modify with something else. Yeah. And is that something that you do as well?
So modifications, a couple of things. One, I like that you watch the workouts first, so you have everything you need and you know what you're doing. Because workouts, in most cases, unless you're really, really lifting heavy weights for like the entire workout, it's so much about having things set up to where you can go from one exercise to the next. You get your heart rate up, you do your strength, you do your flexibility, you do some endurance work, but your heart rate is staying steady because you're going from one activity to the next. So, I mean, you can actually have if a workout would take you 30 minutes with all the pause breaks, you could have a much more effective workout in 20 to 25 minutes, just knowing where you were going to go next. Now, as far as me with modifications, I modify things all the time. And even if I'm watching a streaming workout and they say, this is the modification, I'll look at that and I'll be like, yeah, that's still too hard. And I'll modify it even further. And I think, that's the other thing. Once you figure out how to do exercise, like how to work out, and, when you're working with a trainer and such, like you get such a solid foundation that you start seeing ways to do modifications where, that hadn't really been suggested to you before. And it's just, you're kind of in the moment and a little bit more invested in your own program, which is always a good thing. Health and fitness or whatever else.
Yeah. Wow, you just have a fascinating story. You're doing so many things, and I remember when you first, I think you found me on Instagram, and you sent me this message, and I was like, this guy, it's so nice of this guy, because you sent me a audio message, and I was visiting family, and I was like, this guy with CP, like he left me this really nice message, and I really appreciated that.
What I've found is that, just take a little bit of extra effort with things. Like, so you mentioned the message. I love sending the audio and the video messages because they are more personalized. And it just, like, some people, it's funny, like, first off, they'd hear that, they'd be like, why is this person sending me a message like this? But others will be like, you know what? That's awesome. I really appreciate that. And those are the type of people that I want to be connected with. And that's something else that you realize, and you hear this from all the stuff that you do. Like, you're not going to please everybody. You're going to find people that vibe with you, and then you're going to find others that aren't so much, you're not so much their cup of tea, and move on. So.
Yep. And I wanted to ask you, because we left off when I was on your podcast, we were talking about advocacy. Yes. And I know that there was a time when you really didn't share your story of having cerebral palsy, and you've kind of shifted, haven't you?
I've shifted to where, like, it's part of what I share. I mean, I'm fortunate with the stuff that I do. Like, I literally, if I wanted to talk about any and all things besides CP, I would still have plenty of stuff to talk about. But I also know that there are plenty of individuals that have CP that are that I've connected with, and they come across my stuff on social or the podcast. And parents of kids with disabilities, like, I think for them, I end up being like some future possibility.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
And when you hear that at first, like, that's super heavy, and you're like, that's a lot of pressure. But then you're like, you know what? If somebody sees what it is that I'm doing, and they start to know a little bit about, like, what I've gotten through to be here, like, you never know what they're dealing with, and that could be, it could be, you could just be giving them hope. Like, as crazy as that might sound sometimes, like, you never know what you're going to end up being to somebody. So
yeah, and so what, as far as advocacy goes, is there an area or areas that you think are not getting enough attention when it comes to kids and adults, because we're both adults, but generally anything there?
I think the biggest thing is for professionally. I think when you actually get into the working environment, you don't realize how competitive it is in general, and then it just seems like when you have a disability, you've got that much more stacked up against you, like as multipliers. So I think anybody that's been able to kind of, have their career or do their own thing, I think if you're able to give people kind of a heads up of what it's really like, there's so many opportunities if you, again, hang with it and push forward and really figure out who you are and what you want to do. But it's tough out there, and, you're not going to just be given a job or an opportunity. Like, you have to be able to find it. Now, by the same token, again, people, as we've talked about, the CP have a ton of resilience, and they have the skills. It's just I think that if we can let young people know, and young could even be us, you still have like 50, 60 decades, 50 years, like, just let them know what to expect and how to prepare. And that's really, if you have an interest in something, like, go in on it. You may not be able to dedicate all your time to it, but if you've got some extra time, like, work on that skill, work on that thing that you're really interested in, and see where it goes.
Absolutely. Because just because you have a disability doesn't mean you can't do something. You might have to do it differently, or, let's be honest, it might take you longer. That's why I asked about your certification, because I didn't know if any of it involved, something like physically that maybe it took you longer.
So the physical stuff, they were actually very accommodating with. So it was actually set up to where I wouldn't need, and this was, my gosh, this wasn't even the main personal training certification. This was another certification that I took. And, but yeah, I mean, it's, everybody's situation's different, and see, that's another thing too, that a lot of people don't necessarily know, is that, like, if you need accommodations, ask for them. We were talking about mental health, and there's no shame in that. There's no shame in knowing who you are and what it is you need to be successful. Ask for.
Right, and plus there's a law around it too. So you kind of, people don't know what they don't know what they're entitled to.
Some people try to skate around that law, and you
right. So that's why you're saying, right, you have to know, you have to know what you're entitled to, and you have to advocate for yourself, because really no one's going to do it for you.
It's this weird thing where, like, as somebody with a disability, you can very easily think, depending on what your upbringing was, like, you're entitled to something that you're not really entitled to. That's why I mentioned the whole thing about the job opportunity. But by the same token, you also can be entitled to stuff by the law and not necessarily know it. And you can think back on situations, you'll be like, wow, that was actually illegal, and I never really thought about it. So
because maybe you didn't even know. Like, I never had any accommodations in any of my schooling. I mean, I don't even know back then if they had that kind of stuff. But, like, when you go to college, right, like, you know how one class is like 5 miles away from the other one, or like whatever, that kind of thing. You bring up a good point. And so what would you like to see in the future when it comes to cerebral palsy and cerebral palsy awareness?
I think I would just like to see more people figuring out who they are and being comfortable enough to share their story, because I think the opportunity that we have, whereas, people, if they don't have examples to draw to, they draw into stereotypes all the time, unfortunately. But we have a wonderful opportunity to use the tools at our disposal, which right now are our phones, and we can
say that all the time. Exactly.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's nuts. We can change the perception that people have around us.
And that's what you do every day. You have harnessed the internet you meet people. You met me on there. You podcasts. You need the internet to do that. I mean, so I'm always saying to people, I'm like a broken record. I'm like, everyone's on their phone all day long. So right now I have a campaign going to try to get the White House to light up in green. You would think that I have to pull teeth. I can't even get people to share. Can you just share this post? And all you have to do is just press the share button. That's all you do. Right? So, and you're on your phone all day. So I don't understand why people don't get, they don't have to write a letter, but I mean, just advocacy in general, right?
This is so, well, like, and so this is a really interesting thing too, because the actual act of somebody sharing a post is not hard at all. The thing that so many people, and we all have trouble with it, especially like when we have our causes and our things that we're working on, we're like, in our heads, you're like, why can't you just share this? Exactly. But what really helps, but it's the thing that's really hard to remember sometimes is that it's what's most important to us, but it's not.
Might not be important to them. No, I know that. Right, exactly.
But no, like, and so, but like, this is the hard game, because I have conversations with people all the time, disabled or not, where they're like, people just don't understand, like, what they could do and like how good of an opportunity this is. And like, you honestly have to look at it and say, just because I think what I'm doing is a great opportunity and you think what you're doing is a great opportunity, like that person is who really decides.
Absolutely right.
The only thing you can do is put your message out in a compelling way, and that's part of the whole thing of like adjusting your message, because it's a game, and it's really hard, especially when you've got something that you really really believe in, like you do with the Light Up campaigns. Like, you're like, why can't everybody do this? And it's just like you have to, like, it's so hard to train yourself to say, well, how could I position this differently so that they're going to be interested in it? But darn well, you could have the best message in the world that would resonate with 100% of the people.
Right.
Only 3% of them are going to share it. Like, it's a really small percentage of people that like.
Well, I brought it up because the last time we talked, we were both talking about how we wish more people would get involved in whatever way they want to. If they want to start a podcast, if they want to be a personal trainer, whatever they want to do to move the needle along as far as raising awareness.
Well, and that's, and I knew exactly where you were going with it, and you put something out there that I thought was really just so awesome to talk about, because like, you put your stuff out, and by the way, like, if you decide to put your stuff out, if there was a room of 100 of us, you're ahead of like 88 of them. Like, 88 of 100 people will never act on anything. But the really hard part is when you're doing the things and you're grinding things out. And I could tell by your reaction when I accidentally insinuated Gary Vaynerchuk over Jordan Side. You know who Gary V is. Yes. So like, you know, you do all the things that these people say, and you're like putting the content out and your intent is right and all this other stuff, and it doesn't translate. So immediately,
how it is. You can't control, you know, you only can do what you do.
Exactly. But if somebody would have told us that when we started out, you know, because it's something that you're always kind of reminded of. But yeah, I just thought it was a cool opportunity because if we can get people to really take action on starting a podcast, starting a YouTube channel, writing a book, or like whatever it is you want to do, like collect seashells. I mean, like anything. Yep. Anything. Yeah, like if we can get them started, cool. But then if we can also let them know that, hey, this is kind of what it's like when you start out with things, just give them a heads up.
I mean, they would have so much more confidence too. If anything that you attempt to do and then you like it and you're good at it and you continue it, it just gives you a sense of purpose and you feel confident because you can say, hey, I did that for however long. If you want to switch to something up, whatever, but you're gonna always be able to say that you have an X number amount of podcast episodes and you had a certain amount in a year, and no one can take that away from you.
It's true. So all of you guys listening that have something on your mind, like, do it. Just start. It's not going to end up the way you think that you're hoping it will. Most likely, like darn near 100%, it's not going to end up the way that you want it to exactly. You're going to learn so much. So just get started.
Exactly. Well, that's a good place to end it, and tell everybody, where can we find you?
Best place to find me, again, would be on the websites, yourlevelfitness.com or darylperry.com. It's DARYLPERRY.com. And you can you'll be connected to all my socials and stuff there. And Instagram is probably the best place to reach out to me. Like, just message me. I'm at Your Level Fitness on there. So. Okay.
And if people are interested in coming on your podcast, then they can either message you through your website.
They can probably be best for them to just message me on Instagram. That's where a lot of those conversations start. So, yeah.
Okay. But you have 2 accounts on Instagram. Do you prefer one over the other?
Send everything to Your Level Fitness. That's going to be the main one.
Okay. Well, there you have it. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Daryl is a fascinating guy. I highly recommend you check him out if you have any questions that have to do with nutrition or fitness. And I look forward to seeing you all again on the next episode of CP Conversations with Nicole Luongo, brought to you by cerebralpalsyconference.com. It was great talking to you, Daryl.
You too, Nicole. See ya.
Bye.